So who are the quarterbacks in NFL history most like J.J. McCarthy, and have those guys had success? Welcome to a Mailbag episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day every single day. I appreciate my hashtag everydayers so very much. Today is a mailbag episode replacing Town Hall Tuesday with a Town Hall Wednesday. We're doing a 3-day week here, a lighter week here in the dead period, so I can catch up on a couple other things. So we'll dive right in. So thank you so much for your submissions. If you ever have a question or if you want to confess a hot take anonymously, you can do so in the Google form, which is linked in the show notes or YouTube description to any podcast episode. The first question comes from not your average 756 Elo. GG, buddy. Who asks, it seems that the biggest knock on J.J. McCarthy is deep accuracy. Is there a QB you can think of in recent memory that had a similar scouting report? How did he do? Is there a QB you know of that improved his deep accuracy substantially from college to the pros? I think there are two answers to this that I can think of. There's one you want to hear, and then there's one I don't think you want to hear. The one you want to hear is Joe Burrow. His deep accuracy was maybe the primary knock on him coming out of in like the scout. If you go back and look up like Joe Burrow scouting reports, everybody says, spotty accuracy deep. There was still a lot of explosiveness in that LSU offense. Like it would still hit enough where it might not have felt like it, but that was what people, I didn't really participate in that discourse. I don't have a great sense for like what I thought of Joe Burrow coming out of college. I didn't really pay attention to him till the Super Bowl year, since it's an AFC team. But that he seems to have a very similar kind of, hey, the arm strength isn't great. The talent isn't necessarily there. Is he the guy or isn't he the guy? But I think regardless, nobody would look at the Cincinnati Bengals and be like, Joe Burrow can't throw deep now. So that I think answers all your questions. But you could come up with a myriad of other quarterbacks that had bad deep accuracy that didn't work out because maybe they didn't have any accuracy at all. Just generally inaccurate quarterbacks. But mostly, what comes to mind are quarterbacks that are known now as like conservative backup types. Mac Jones, Teddy Bridgewater. That, they couldn't throw the deep ball, and therefore like that kind of held them back from ever being explosive. The hope is that J.J. McCarthy can be explosive, and they are going to throw deep. It's Kevin O'Connell. This is not going to be a conservative offense. But the question is, will he be able to like make good on that? Will he be efficient with that sort of deeper ADOT? And I think that's why they're working on like his mechanics and stuff. Nolan M asks, what sorts of D-line personnel packages do you envision on first downs? Will Hargrave typically be in on first downs, or are there snaps available next to Phillips on first downs and short yardage? Okay, so I think there's a big misconception on like how defenses decide their personnel. Down and distance does not decide this for you. Sometimes you'll have, third down only stuff, but on neutral downs, you're matching personnel for the most part. Unless you see like a real matchup and you want to go do something kind of off the beaten path. If they come out in their 11 personnel, you're coming out in nickel. If they come out in a base personnel, 21 or 12, you're coming out in your base. You're matching size to size and speed to speed, unless you're in a situation where you're like, they seem like they don't have the strongest O-line. I bet our nickel personnel can stop the run, and therefore we're going to have a speed advantage all game long, so we're going to do that, right? But assuming a normal situation, you'll have two options on first down of base and nickel for the most part. Sometimes situational will get there, or if you play a team that loves to be four wide all the time, then you might do something different. But in a general situation against 12 and 21, you're going to have your base personnel. So I think the question is more about fronts. So that base personnel, those D tackles, unless something crazy happens in camp, are Phillips, Allen, and Hargrave. You're probably going to want to stretch those guys out either in a 3-4 under or over front, or in a tight front, which I've affectionately dubbed Ragnar because it comes from the Pat Narduzzi Panther front that or Spartan it was when he was at Michigan, so I've called it Ragnar. That's a thing I made up. But either way, it's 5 down, a 5-man surface on the line of scrimmage, and the point of that is breaking up doubles, which therefore sort of covers up Javon Hargrave's problem with double teams that he's had the last couple years, because it's going to be a lot harder to get a double team on him with an extra guy on the surface. I think that when you go into nickel, he's the guy that comes off the field rather than Phillips or Jonathan Allen. If it is Phillips, I'm not super surprised, but I think Phillips is more the guy that comes off in pass-only situations. But in a nickel personnel first down, I think you have 97 and 93 out there. That's going to be my guess, and then it's a matter of what fronts you pick, what blocking angles you're trying to mess with, and that's like a game plan thing. Matt asks, on the 53-man roster projection, you mentioned that it was harder to find people to include at the back end of the roster. You didn't really feel bad about making cuts. Do you think this indicates a general lack of depth on the team, and why do you think the team is in that spot? Yeah, no, so the reason for this is pretty well documented by the local beat. They've been kind of all over this. They don't have a lot of draft picks, and they lost a lot of players this year. So a lot of it's sort of just like a lot of light bulbs went out at the same time. So they lost a lot of contracts and a lot of depth players left. Many Patrick Jones leaves to free agency. They have replaced some of those guys, but not all of those guys. And the draft did not supplement it nearly as much either. They're because of the Dallas Turner trade and I think still parts of the TJ Hawkinson trade. So they only have 4, or they ended up with 5 draft picks, right? So they just didn't, they went into undrafted free agency needing 20 players, and they signed, I think, 19 of those players in undrafted free agency, which means that you do all the roster math and you end up having to include undrafted rookies you know nothing about, because those aren't the guys that I'm going to spend my time on pre-draft, right? No shade to them. It's just not where my priorities are going to lie as an analyst. But that's why. So they have a lot of undrafted free agents that are competing for back roster spots. Now, the Vikings have tried to mitigate this issue by spending a lot relatively in undrafted free agency. And there might be a market inefficiency there anyways. $100,000 in undrafted free agency might go like a lot farther than it does in classic free agency. Anonymous asks, a big long one, I'm going to paraphrase. In your analysis of Dallas Turner, it seems like you deliberately avoid weighting his performance against the expectations that come with that investment of draft capital. Are you at all disappointed in how raw he looked as a pass rusher? And do you think we need to adjust our expectations for his realistic ceiling? So I think that a lot of people do this in a way that I super disagree with Dallas Turner, because the amount, you can really, really bad faith the amount that they spent on Dallas Turner, because they made a whole trade that ended up in Dallas Turner that had nothing to do with Dallas Turner. And I think if you're not thinking of that, you're kind of not really understanding the value proposition the Vikings made. And you're not thinking about the decision on the terms that the Vikings had to think about it, which I don't know what exercise you're doing or what you're trying to learn, right? They made a trade in March of 2023, March of 2024, that poised them to get to trade up for a quarterback. They didn't end up needing to trade up very far for a quarterback at all. They went up 1 pick and they didn't use any of the extra first rounder that they got from Houston in that trade. I think you can look at that and say that was a misstep. I think you could just say that was a whoopsie doodle no. The Vikings traded at a pretty steep tax, like a pretty inefficient trade, to swim upstream because Houston knew it was about a quarterback. They could charge you more and you have to say yes, because what are you going to do? Not have a quarterback. And then only for the quarterback that you wanted to slip through the draft. I think that came from not knowing what the Giants were going to do and making the wrong guess about it, not knowing what the Raiders were going to do and making the wrong guess about it, not knowing what you were going to get from the Bears and Jets right above you and making the wrong guess about it. So I think that was a misstep of misunderstanding the economy of the draft that year, and then spending a whole bunch of extra capital out of an abundance of caution. You kind of bought insurance you didn't need. Now you're out the capital. That has nothing to do with Dallas Turner at all. That decision was made well before they knew Dallas Turner was going to fall down the board, and it wasn't about that. So saying that they traded, 5-6 draft picks for Dallas Turner, to me is just bad faith. And I kind of just don't trust that you're doing anything other than starting with a conclusion and working backwards. No matter how they got there, the expectations for Dallas Turner are tied to the 17th overall pick. They picked him 17th overall. Did you get enough for 17th overall? If we say you overpaid to get to 17th overall, we can talk about that as a value thing. But in terms of the decision to select Dallas Turner, to trade up and go get Dallas Turner because he was falling and get to 17th to do it? Is he making good? If the 17th overall pick has a slow start to the beginning of his rookie year, but then like kind of comes on at the end of the year, we're fine with that. That seems great. So I think he's on a track I'm perfectly comfortable with. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills when I say that. Like, did you not remember the really cool interception? That was a great play. Or the like disruptions against the Falcons and the Bears, that really cool sack against the Bears where he cooked Darnell. He cooked Darnell Wright. I mean, like, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So why are we mad? That seems great for the 17th overall pick. And now he's coming into the second year. Let's hope he takes a step forward. I've got a lot more questions, some hot takes. And then there's a weird thing I want to talk to you about that doesn't have a lot to do with the Vikings, but might in the future. That'll all be next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Rugiet Ready. You probably heard of Viagra or Cialis, maybe even tried them, but if you're looking for something a little more, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. It's a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. And unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in on average in like 15 minutes. The effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control whenever the moment is right. It's a completely online ordering system. It connects you with a board-certified doctor and ships your treatment directly to your door. And you can even read real customer reviews on their site, which can help people feel a little bit more confident and present in the moment. Head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety effectiveness or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. Moving right along here with the Locked On Vikings podcast. We got a little mailbag episode. The next one comes from friend of Butts, who asks, better motion, jet or bump? Well, I know what your answer is. But okay, so it's funny. I don't know necessarily what you mean by bump motion, because in various offenses, it can mean different things. It can mean the halfback bumping out to a receiver role. It can mean a tight end bumping out to a slot. It can mean like an offset, like a condensed 3-man offset trips kind of thing. Cluster, that's the word I'm looking for, that bumps into a bunch or the other way around. And I've seen this word used in like different ways in different offenses. I'm going to guess that you mean like the one we see with the Kevin O'Connell offense a lot, where they're in that cluster, that kind of 3 guys right next to each other, and then one of them bumps over and it becomes like a classic bunch, versus jet motion, which is a little more universal, that, you know, looks like a jet sweep. I like that one better. I just like what it does for the run game a little bit more, but they both have very different applications and they both very much have their place in an NFL offense. Alan Page's perfectly pointy and possibly perpendicular pinky asks, could I, an average height and weight, mid-20s something male who's never punted professionally, hypothetically train myself to punt at an NFL level, assuming I'm willing to do whatever gym requirements, etc.? Is there any genetic or athletic requirements for being an NFL punter that can't be obtained through hard work and dedication? I think there is a natural athleticism that very few people have. For one, if you've ever seen, like, one of the most striking things that I remember from a time that I actually got to go cover training camp from the sidelines with the rest of the journalists was you could walk by the weight room at TCO, and on a big screen, they have like that day's requirements. Everybody's got to come do their lift, and here's what you got to go complete, these exercises. And I was like, looking at the ones for the linemen, and they're like insane, right? And then I looked for the ones at the quarterback, and it's still like a lot. And then I looked at the ones for like kicker and punter, and I was like, I still cannot even like start that. So I do think there's that, but there's also a smoothness. There is just a sort of coordination and control of your body that basically any NFL athlete needs to have just to get to this point. I think for a punter, if you're like average height and weight, that means you're probably under 6 feet. You're probably under 200 pounds, right? Or maybe around 200 pounds. So you're immediately in like immense danger of dying on the field at those sizes. But you also you probably want to be a little taller as a punter because you just, a longer leg has a larger pendulum. I think you would have a pretty tough time. It certainly doesn't sound like the kind of thing that would be without precedent. There are small players in the NFL at all positions. But yeah, I do think that there's probably some God-given talent and athleticism that isn't just like how much you've gone to the gym. Sam W. asks, I keep hearing that Kevin O'Connell is a top 3 play caller in the NFL from the media. What actually makes a good play caller in the NFL, and how does KOC specifically separate himself from the other coaches? That's a good question, and I think it drives at something that I really like, or I really like to challenge in people, which is like, if you didn't like the play call, what about the play call was bad, right? And for the most part, I think the way that we evaluate play callers is very results-based as like a national community. It's pretty much, did you make the wrong decision on 4th and 1, which isn't, did you make a good or bad decision on 4th and 1, then it's, did it work? That's the classic cognitive trap that as individuals, I think you and I can sort of resist if we're aware of it, but groups can't. Group discussion will always be, they shouldn't have gone for it on 4th down if it didn't work. There's just something, I don't know, psychological about human nature that's just going to make that always happen. But for me, what makes a good or bad play caller is how accurate are they in terms of putting guys in the right position to succeed? I think a really interesting example of this is, I forget what game it was, but there was a 4th and 1 where they tried the tush push and they had Brandon Powell be the pusher. And there was a lot of criticism about that because Brandon Powell's a very small guy. Now, Brandon Powell's a very strong guy, so I'm not sure if it's as good of a critique as you think. But I think that that's on the right plane of like what we should be. We should be talking about that. We should be talking about, okay, the tush push requires somebody to be strong and push from behind. Did we select the right person to do that? Did we put our players in a position where they can succeed? Look at like Chicago. We have Keenan Allen running the tunnel screen while DJ Moore runs a clear out on the other side of the field. Are we sure that that's the right decision? Calling a tunnel screen is something every offense does. And if you're looking at it and going, why would they call a tunnel screen there? Why call a tunnel screen anywhere? Everyone does it, and it has its merits, its pros, its cons, just like any play call. And another play call that they would have called if it didn't work would be vulnerable to the same argument, which probably means the argument isn't very good. With like the Shane Waldron stuff in Chicago, that was like, there was a very clear, like, you can make a tunnel screen work, but don't you want to use the right person? So like, it's not just personnel usage and like target share and stuff like that, but it's rather, you've got this kind of offensive line. Are you asking them to do what they're good at, or are you asking them to do what your offense does and they're not good at? I think that's a good play calling thing. But the second thing with a good play caller is how much how easy are they making it for these guys? Or are they asking them to do the hardest things in the world and then hoping it's going to be helpful? If you want to beat cover 2, are you going to throw one of the hardest throws in football, which is the turkey hole? Right? That corner that you have to get outside the safety, but over the top of the corner, and there's going to be a really tight hole for that. Are you asking your quarterback to thread that needle, or can you get something up the seam? Can you cut a safety in half? Can you do something a little bit more creative? Can you run the ball into that? Are you willing to do that? I think O'Connell's really good at both of those things, and I think that's what makes him a good play caller. Bimble Zibs asks, do you think the Packers' secondary situation is more dire than ours? I'm going to be honest, I don't have any idea who's on Green Bay's secondary, so let me just quick pull up our lads because I am very unfamiliar. Listen to Locked On Packers for better Packers information. Nate Hobbs, Keyshawn Nixon, Javon Bullard. There's your corners. Evan Williams and Xavier McKinney as safety. Wow. Oh my God. That's pretty bad, man. Yeah, I think I would probably take Byron Murphy over any of those players. They probably would argue with me over like Xavier McKinney, but we have Harrison Smith at safety, so like good luck. And Josh Metellus. Yeah, I think we've got a lot more going on at secondary. Yeah, if I'm the Packers, if I were covering the Packers, oh my God, I'd be pounding the table for Jalen Ramsey like every day. I wonder if Peter's doing that. I'm not familiar. Somebody let me know. Big Slime asks, Kirk Cousins was on track for roughly 4,600 yards, 36-ish TDs, and 10 interceptions. Where do you think that would have put him in the MVP race? So I looked at this. I assume you're talking about 2023 because last year he had 16 interceptions in an incomplete season, so that doesn't match. Also, of course, not an MVP that he got benched. But 2023, at the time he went down after that 49ers and like over the course of like at like halftime of that Packers game when he was playing really well again, those conversations were happening. And he was very much like, hey, this is an MVP pace right now. And people were citing exactly the stat that you cited. So that is kind of the sort of taste left in Vikings fans' mouth, which I think is nice. That, you know, he kind of a good note was the final thing Kirk Cousins did for the Vikings was smoke the Packers in Lambeau. We love that. Thank you. The thing about Kirk Cousins is it never lasted. The bad times never lasted and the good times never lasted. It would have fallen back apart. He would have fallen back out of the MVP race. It's always what happens. And either way, guys do get hurt and it's not necessarily fair, but it does decide things. Kind of a moot point. Soda asks, heard you say that Zamiah Fawn turns like a boat. Is this correctable? If so, how do the Vikings correct it? I think that's one of those God-given athleticism things. What your agility is. If you just aren't an agile player, you can do techniques that like make up for it. You can try to give yourself a little more cushion. You can try to be a little bit smarter about which direction you commit to so that you don't have to change direction as fast. You can sort of try to cheat on things. But it's pretty hard to play corner with bad agility, and that's why a guy like him doesn't get drafted. Okay, next up, I have some hot takes and weird thing. Stay tuned for weird thing. This episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Monarch Money. If you ever wished managing your money felt easier, if you can get easily overwhelmed when suddenly there's less money than you thought in your bank account, or you have all these different investments and debts and bills and stuff to juggle, and you don't want to do all the math, let Monarch Money help you out. It's more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. If you are the kind of person that wants to have a smart investment portfolio and also good budgeting and also keep, a good eye on where you can maybe cut back or maybe have an exact idea of the kind of money that you have to spend on fun things so you don't end up living a super dry ascetic lifestyle in the interest of saving more money than you ever have to save, any of those things, Monarch Money can help you out with. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off of your first year. Next up, we have your hot takes. And the first one comes from Scold Outside, who says, while regular season records help with playoff seeding and home field advantage, playing your best football in December and January is key to winning. JJ making mistakes and learning, offensive line continuity, floor is being learned by the cast of new faces, and establishing a feared run will it take time. Therefore, at 9 or 10 wins, I see a universe where the Vikings are road favorites in multiple playoff games. Yeah, do the 2007 Giants thing where you get hot at the right time and you go like 8-0 going into the playoffs and you're like super hot and you're actually just really good. You just had some stuff to figure out in the beginning. There have been Super Bowl runs like that. It just depends. I want to say the 2015 Broncos were kind of like that. Where they were like up and down, but they got like hot at the right time. They kind of figured it all out at the right time as they were like oscillating between Brock Osweiler and Peyton Manning. But I do like, I often think about like, sometimes I feel like the way the Vikings win the Super Bowl someday kind of has to be weird. I don't know if we get to see the team be, 15-2 and the juggernaut and favorite and like, OKC Thunder this. I kind of think that they do have to be like a scrappy 6 seed that like wins a weird one and like something super fluky happens that everyone says, well, that'll never happen again, but you don't have to care because it's a ring. I don't know. Sometimes I think about that's how it has to happen. I could see it. The kid copying off you in math class, deep cut, says JJ McCarthy will break the Bears single season passing yards and touchdown records in his first season with the Vikings. I don't think that's very hard. That'd be 30 touchdowns and 3,839 yards. There's an Eric Kramer season from 1995. That's their best there. Did they even make they beat the Vikings in the playoffs that year, didn't they? Nope. I might be thinking of 93 or 94 maybe. Yeah, they did not make the playoffs that year. That was the best quarterbacking year in Chicago Bears history. And that's not that far from JJ McCarthy's over-under. So this is a pretty cool take. Will the real Slim Shady please stay down? Says Ty Felton will become wide receiver 3 and stay the rest of the season by week 5. And you will be saying next year's offseason you were wrong about him. So if this happens, if Ty Felton is like truly earns the wide receiver 3 job by week 5, I would immediately admit that. Why would I wait till the offseason? Unless it was like Jalen Nailor gets hurt and Ty Felton takes it, and it's like, okay, well, is he going to get the job back when Jalen Nailor's back? And then there's like, is he good at it too? Like, I don't know. When it comes to these predictions, it's pretty easy to let them go when they're like obviously wrong. And people will like, I think I've had this hot take in this mailbag like a lot this offseason. And it's like, you know, if this happens, that's fine. Like, that's not a problem. You're fanficking, but people get really mad when I say anything negative between the months of like April and August. Which is why it's a little bit like, hey, maybe look in the mirror. You know, I have had much hotter opinions, much more spicy, like much more unlikely predictions that go the positive direction, and I don't hear nearly as much guff about it, and I think some of you maybe need to look at why. Kevin from Home Alone says both starting cornerbacks Murphy and Isaiah Rodgers will either have at least 4 interceptions each or make the Pro Bowl not as alternates. That's pretty spicy. But I think the spiciest one comes from Ayatollah Khamenei, who asks, barring suspension, Jordan Addison will have a more statistically productive season than Justin Jefferson. I love that you gave yourself barring suspension so I can never say that you were wrong here. I like that's smart. I mean, you're in a place where it doesn't matter, but I like that you're covering your bases. But that's an insane take. Yeah, that's completely nuts. Jordan Addison is good, but Justin Jefferson is Justin Jefferson, man. I got nothing on you. Congratulations. Okay, so let me really quick pivot here and mention a very interesting thing that I kind of just want to talk about. It doesn't have a lot to do with the Vikings. The Vikings aren't involved with this, but on Pablo Torre Finds Out, he did an episode in conjunction with Mike Florio, claiming to have like unearthed, but it's this like public document about a collusion investigation into a bunch of NFL owners over fully guaranteed contracts. As the story goes, according to this sort of process, or as the allegation goes, the 2022 Deshaun Watson contract, which was fully guaranteed, made a whole bunch of NFL owners nervous that then they would have to give fully guaranteed contracts to their quarterbacks, even with text exchanges that are like Cleveland screwed everything up. And this led to the NFL Management Council, which is like, I'll call it like a committee within the 32 owners, made up of owners, that to then give a presentation essentially saying fully guaranteed contracts shouldn't become the norm. We can't let this become the status quo. So we encourage you to give out less guarantees to your quarterbacks. This would be direct collusion. There are a couple of then really high profile examples of this stuff happening. In particular, the ones that interest me are Kyler Murray and Lamar Jackson. You might remember when Lamar Jackson was on the non-exclusive franchise tag or whichever one that is, and nobody called him. He didn't get a single call from any team, and that was like kind of suspicious. Like that's like an MVP, really. Nobody wants to pay 2 first-round picks for him. And then Kyler Murray's contract negotiation also ended up with less guarantees than he wanted. And there's, again, text from the owners being like, we did pretty good with the guarantees. I think we saved it. It being this like potential status quo. There's 2 things I find interesting from a Vikings perspective here. One, there is no mention in any of this whole thing about Kirk Cousins, who signed a fully guaranteed contract very famously in 2018. I think there was like a Super Bowl incentive there, so it didn't technically count as like fully guaranteed. I think there was a Super Bowl incentive, so it didn't technically count as a fully guaranteed contract, but all the base salary in it was guaranteed. And it seemed to me that was going to be the status quo, like that was going to be the thing the fight was over, but it didn't really start until Deshaun Watson got his, which is wild. Like Dak Prescott got one that was functionally fully guaranteed as well. So, and maybe it was because there was rolling guarantees in some of these Kirk deals, but like Kirk Cousins never played in Minnesota with $1 of unguaranteed base salary. Like it was always either fully guaranteed base salary or things that were converted into bonuses that are also fully guaranteed. So it's weird that it's like coming up now. Maybe it's because Deshaun Watson is a much more toxic entity than Kirk Cousins. So it was like, it looked worse. And, you know, the NFL's all about image. They're all about the PR. And they kind of don't care about anything else. So maybe that counts. But that's one interesting thing. But the other interesting thing is, hey, a couple of years from now, we're going to be talking about this. We're going to be talking about, should the Vikings pay JJ McCarthy? What's the contract going to look like if they do, et cetera? That has to be at least part of their plan. I mean, there's the world where he's Christian Ponder and you don't care, right? But the Vikings are going to be planning for the world where they're going to have to pay him, right? You got to have a strategy for that. And if the norm is to fully guarantee contracts, the JJ McCarthy, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, et cetera, cycle of quarterbacks contracts might be the one where this really comes into focus. So this could have an impact on the Vikings down the line. The actual settlement was there was no damages, nothing. So the union like pretty handily lost this fight, if you remember. But it's still interesting to see that there is this, like, in the legal sense, there was no collusion because it's like all the evidence was too circumstantial, and that's what like the court found. But that there is this pretty concerted effort among owners to keep their sport from becoming like all the other sports where players get fully guaranteed contracts. For some reason, football isn't open to it. And I think it's because football, of all of these sports, is the one where the players have the least power. They're the ones where the owners have the most power, I would say, in comparison to the players. I think they have one of the weaker unions, the weaker player unions, if you just look at the way that labor rights have evolved over the NFL in comparison to other sports. And the NFLPA loses a lot of these fights. If you are interested, I'll link the episode of Pablo Torre Finds Out where you can listen to that. You might see some like sensationalized stuff from it because there's, you know, obviously like some interesting soundbite stuff. There's a whole thing about JC Treader that's fascinating that has really nothing to do with what I'm talking about here. But I think the fight over whether or not teams are going to fully guarantee contracts, like, I think it makes it less likely that JJ McCarthy's contract, if he and when he gets one, is fully guaranteed. And I think that's the same for Caleb Williams, for Jaden Daniels, for Drake May, for any of these 2024 class quarterbacks that work out and do indeed get a second contract with their team. I think it's that much less likely that they're going to be fully guaranteed, not because they don't deserve it, but because all the owners have gotten together and said, we don't want to give it. Which is pretty illegal, but there just wasn't enough evidence to prove it. Anyways, I will see you all on Friday. No Thursday episode, a lighter week this week. Everybody get outside and enjoy good weather if you have it. I will see you all Friday, and as always, Skol.